What's up, everybody? It's your boy, the Cowboy, JR Storm, and my buddy JK coming at you with another episode of the J-Rock Show. And JK, what are we bringing to the people today, my man?
We're bringing the Big 12 today, arguably the best conference in all of SimWorld U. Kansas won 29 games and rode all the way to the quad last season from this conference. They are the number 5 ranked team in the initial SP rankings. We got 3 teams in the initial top 25. Dayton's a newcomer to the conference. Texas and Oklahoma were the 2 worst teams in this conference last year and are not expected to be this year. So we have plenty to go over, and I think the place to start is in Waco with the Baylor Bears. Won 21 games a season ago, number 16 in the SP rankings. JR, how are you feeling about this Bears squad?
I honestly am pretty optimistic for this Bears squad. I think defensively they're going to be solid. A lot of youth on this team, though. That is the one thing that concerns me. And the other thing that I think might get at them, too, is offensive consistency. Can they find that consistent offensive threat? You look at guys like Red John Terre, and Shazad Yokar, guys who can definitely put the ball in the hoop, but Scott Drew definitely has a lot of potential with this squad, and I think they can make it to Hoopsteria, but I think offensively they'll have to find that consistent, stallion.
I agree with you there. I agree with you on the youth standpoint. You got 6 incoming freshmen, only 1 upperclassman on the entire roster, and that's Tristan Holmes. Holmes is probably going to be such an important part of this Baylor backcourt. I really like a potential backcourt of Red Joyner and Tristan Holmes. I do like the pickup of Shazad Jokar. I like Aaron Payne and Jaquan Abdallah. This team does have a little bit of size, but I don't think they're going to win this conference. I think they will be legitimate players. They were a perennial top 10 team last season before losing in the opening round of Hoopsteria. There's definitely a chip on their shoulder down in Waco, but I think there are better teams in this conference, but I do think that another Hoopsteria appearance is on the horizon down for Baylor.
Without question. And now, next school I wanted to talk about is Dayton. Now, Dayton, a team, finished top 4 in the Big 12 last season, record of 24-8. But when you look at the incoming freshmen that they have coming in, really not a lot of, really no one of note, so to speak. Wouldn't you say, JK?
I disagree to a very minor extent. I like Keyshawn Blasingame. I really like Cash Ruffin as well, and I really like River Rose and Maxim Bynum. This team does have talent. They won 24 games a season ago. Saying they have talent would just be false. And I think you and I both know that. But they're facing a much stiffer level of competition now in the Big 12. They're going to be facing players such as Arthur Lattimore, players such as Suno Chapa, who are coming to the conference. And even guys who we just mentioned, like Tristan Holmes. Can Dayton keep up with a tougher conference? I like Maxim Bynum. He's a good post guy. I like Deontay Poland. Very good wing player. And I like the versatility of River Rose. This team, what does worry me about this team, though? They're small. 6'9", Maxim Bynum is their biggest player. Everyone's above 6 feet, but no one's 6'10" or taller. And in a conference that really breeds toughness and interior presence, and you need strength to win, I don't think that Dayton has what it takes.
But yeah, JK, and I think when Dayton, you got to look at the other bigs that are in this conference. You got guys like Jason Crosser, who for Dayton is going to step up, and be able to defend or score on a 7-footer borderline 7-footer, throughout this conference. Dayton, joining the Big 12 this year, definitely a step up in competition from where they were at last year. So that's why I see them more as a middle-of-the-pack kind of team in the Big 12.
That's an interesting assessment. I think I might have to agree with you. I don't think 24-8 is sustainable in a conference with Kansas, Baylor, Texas Tech, Texas, Oklahoma, in a conference that is probably the deepest in all of SimWorld U. And speaking of one of the deepest conferences in SimWorld U, we're moving on to Iowa State. We're moving on to Ames, Iowa. For the Cyclones, ISU. They missed the tournament last year, struggled a bit in Big 12 play, but this season they only have 2 freshmen coming in, a bit of a more experienced roster. Will they be able to handle this new Big 12 lineup, or are they going to fizzle out like they did last season?
Iowa State is a very interesting team to me. Very much probably one of the more experienced teams in the conference. But the one of the 2 freshmen they brought in, I really liked Lath Money's game. I think he can be very versatile on both ends of the floor. Do I think he gets a lot of minutes right away? I'd say he gets, if he's not a starter, maybe first or second guy off the bench. So he'll get quality minutes. And then you look at guys like Kirby Ordway, Shamar Noah, but the one other player that, my sources have been high on and have been saying has absolutely been crushing it, in the offseason, Rafael Villa. Sources have been telling me that he has been lights out from long range, so he could be a huge difference maker for them this upcoming season. So I think Iowa State is good enough to make things interesting.
I don't know if I agree with you there. I like Shamar Noah, great rim protector, and I like Walden Rowells. He could be their starting 4, but it's unknown yet. There's a lot of unknowns with this squad. TJ Otzelberger has proven that he is one of the better head coaches in the conference, so maybe he can kind of pull a rabbit out of the hat here and surprise people with this squad, but I expect them to be at the bottom of this conference this season.
Yeah, definitely will be a team to keep an eye on. Could go either way. But moving on to the next team, and we've got Kansas. JK, you know my feelings toward Kansas being a Midwest guy, so I'll let you field this one. What do you see with Kansas?
I think a potential return to the quad is very much in play down in Lawrence. Bill Self, his track record at Kansas speaks for itself. He brings in Nas Hall. He brings in Charles Pinkard. He returns Madison Miles. He returns Jabbar Wilson. He returns Jarvis Woodson. This squad, there's only 3 freshmen coming in, and the 3rd freshman is Jackson Whitlock, who's a 7-footer who's going to be a big player for this team probably next season. This team is elite as they come. There's a reason they made the quad last season, but will they be able to sustain expectations and fend off teams like Oklahoma and Texas? That's my question. Will Miles, Nas Hall, Jabbar Wilson, will they be able to kind of keep Arthur Lattimore or Suno Chapa, these elite-level freshmen entering the Big 12, in line?
As much as it pains me to say it, I have to go with Kansas as my preseason pick to win the Big 12. As much as it pains me to say it, JK, I mean, you just look at the depth of this Jayhawk team. I mean, really, very few teams in all of SimWorld U, to be honest, match up depth-wise like that. And I mean, they got so many... They're going to be able to win games in so many ways. They've got the size to score down low. They've got great guard play, with Nas Hall and Charles Pinkard. Jarvis Woodson, projected to be an SWBA pick in the draft.
I think Woodson could sneak his way into the first round after a strong season this year.
Yeah, I very well think he could be making a case to be a first rounder this year. I mean, I currently have him sort of in the 40 to 30 range in my draft board, so my personal opinion. But moving on to the other team in Kansas, we've got Kansas State. Jerome Tang has a very interesting roster to me. A little bit of youth with a little bit of experience. Only one senior, 3 freshmen, 2 juniors, and the rest being sophomores. They have size. They have guard play. And to me, they have one of the more, who I think could be one of the more underrated players in the entire Big 12, in Nathaniel Zilberman. What do you like about this Kansas State squad?
I like that there's a lot of unknowns. There is a lot of unknowns, which could be a concern. But I think in the case of KSU, I think that it's kind of a good thing. Roscoe Scarlett, freshman guard, didn't play in SimWorld Prep, pushing for a starting spot in SimWorld U. That will tell you a lot. Nathaniel Zilberman was a top 100 recruit before committing to KSU. Big pickup for Jerome Tang. And Anthony Wilson, 7'1", 246 as a junior. That is a man amongst boys. We were talking about Dayton not having size. A guy they're going to have to worry about is Anthony Wilson. Then they have John Michael Akumu. They have George Clark. This team has a lot of ways they can beat you. They have, like you said, they have size. They can shoot. They can defend you well. I think this is the dark horse to win the Big 12. I think that they're a team that people are going to sleep on. I think they're a team that people are taking lightly, and they shouldn't. Because I think Roscoe Scarlett is going to establish himself as one of the better guards in this conference as a freshman. People don't really know a lot about his game, but he's got a great, refined perimeter game, and I think that's really going to help him at the SimWorld U ranks.
Yeah, without question. I definitely wouldn't be surprised at all to see Kansas State, make some noise in the Big 12, and honestly, I could see them cracking Hoops area as well. But with, like you said, all of the unknowns, I think within the first few weeks of the season, we'll be able to tell if this team has, Hoops area potential or whatnot. Because I think within the first few weeks of the season, you're going to get a lot of those questions starting to be answered. But now moving on to Norman, we've got Oklahoma, the Sooners, bringing in one of the most exciting freshmen in the country in Suno Chapa. They returned Jace Miguez. Porter Moser, is a coach who has experience being in the quad, from his time at Loyola. Oklahoma, also a team that underperformed last season, winning less than 10 games. Do you see it being a turnaround season for Moser and the Sooners?
I do. I think Suno Chapa is one of the best freshmen in all of SimWorld U. I think he's going to show why in Norman from day one. I think him and Jace Miguez are going to be a duo that is a force to be reckoned with from day one. You can't sleep on Floyd Henderson either. Deontay Trice is another one where I expect there to be a sophomore leap. This team does have experience. The only freshman they really brought in was Suno Chapa. So I think that in Norman, yes, they won 7 games last year. Do I think they're going to win 25 this year? No, but I think they're going to return to Hoops area, win 19, 20, 21 games, and show people that they are not to be taken lightly in this conference.
And I'm going to go ahead and, I guess you could consider this my hot take for this episode, JK. If you're looking at teams from last season who had a losing record or finished well below 500 that could potentially make a run, crack Hoops area, and potentially make a championship run, Oklahoma's at the top of the list in that category of teams to me. When, like you said, when you look at the experience, you look at, they have one of the best backcourts in all of SimWorld U to me. When you look at Floyd Henderson and Jace Miguez, kind of listed as a forward, but his game, I think, more kind of matches like a guard. Suno Chapa can kind of go back and forth. And then, Floyd Henderson, widely projected to be a first-round pick, in the upcoming SWBA draft. I think if there is a team that could make a huge turnaround and go on a potential championship run, following, a well below 500 season last season, I think it's Oklahoma. And that's my hot take for the episode.
I disagree with you, but we're going to get into my hot take for this conference later in this episode. We're going to move on to Stillwater with Oklahoma State, the Oklahoma State Cowboys. They, like we mentioned Jason Crosser earlier in the episode, that's their big freshman pickup, 7'2", 223. But they have three other freshmen coming in. There's a lot of unknowns on this Cowboys roster. They made Hoopsteria last year, but were not really a force to be reckoned with. There's not a ton of size outside of Crosser, and the guards seem to be a little bit small too. So I'm not high on this team at all. I think they're going to be right down there at the bottom of this conference. I think they're going to be right down there with Iowa State.
I disagree to an extent. I definitely think, do I think they're a top of the pack team in the Big 12? No. Do I think they can be a middle of the pack team, potentially, outside chance at cracking Hoopsteria? I think they could be, but a lot of it comes down to, I think, what they're going to get out of, two of their four incoming freshmen. I've always been high on Jose Angel Camacho's game, a very versatile forward. Jaime Luis Donoso, another forward who can provide you a lot of versatility. There is just too many unknowns for me to, put them past being projected to be a middle-of-the-pack team in the conference.
I don't think they're elite. I think this conference is too strong, and ultimately it's going to be too much for... I think it's going to be too much for OSU to handle. I like Crosser. I think they could do some damage next season. I don't think this season is really going to be their year.
All right, and moving on to the next team, we've got TCU. Now, what do you like about the Horned Frogs, JK?
Horned Frogs are definitely one of the more intriguing teams in this conference. Everyone's talking about Oklahoma, Texas. In the state of Texas, TCU, I feel like, is getting slept on a little bit. I don't think they're one of the best teams in SimWorld U, but I think they can surprise people. I like that they only have two freshmen coming in Nene Gibson and D'Angelo Pinkard. I like DeQuan Sherman, big body as a junior. And if we're really talking about what this team is capable of, Deshaun Clyburn, Nene Gibson, Craig Gibson, the two cousins, Martin Ganov. This team has experience. Jamie Dixon is one of the most underrated coaches in the entire conference. I think they'll be able to be very fundamental on both sides of the ball, and would not surprise me to see this team return to Hoopsteria, because they gave UConn a great fight in the second round of Hoopsteria last year, and I would not be surprised to see them give a team like Kansas or a team like Texas trouble in this conference.
Yeah, they are they are also a very intriguing roster to me. And, talking about Nene Gibson, coming into this last SimWorld prep season, he was projected to be a big-time player. Very much had an underwhelming season. You can attribute that to a lot of reasons. He goes from being maybe more of the high major pick to, coming to TCU. I think he can be a difference maker for TCU. And then also, Martin Genov, one of the more underrated guards in all of SimWorld U, I think. 6'2", out of Cheetah, Russia. I really like his game. I think he can do it all on the floor. Tough defender, can score the ball. I really like this TCU team, and I think they could very well make it to the top of the Big 12.
I don't think they're the best team in the Big 12, but I think they're like what you said about Oklahoma State. I think they can make things interesting. I think they'll give every single team a great fight on any given night, and I think they'll surprise people, TCU. But staying in the Lone Star State, let's talk about the most intriguing team in this conference, the Texas Longhorns. One of the teams I grew up a fan of, actually, is the Texas Longhorns. So I'm super excited to see what this team is doing. Rodney Terry, year 2 of Rodney Terry, brings in Arthur Lattimore, Vincent Magic, and returns Anthony Young. What do you think the ceiling is in Austin?
Well, I think Texas, is definitely a team that could make, that has hoops area potential written all over them. But, a lot of that will hinge on how will, Arthur Lattimore and Vincent Magic and Junior Espinoza, who is also a very solid, versatile forward, perform coming in as well. What will their contributions be, and can they be consistently efficient and effective? I think that's what a lot of Texas's success is going to hinge on. But I really like what Texas has, in terms of roster construction. A little heavy at the forward position as compared to the guard spot. But, they've got a little bit of experience. They've got a big freshman class. A big notable freshman class. You've got the triple-double man himself in Vincent Magic. I see him getting quality minutes right off the bat. Arthur Lattimore, I think, could very well has an outside chance of, contending for Freshman of the Year. I think Texas could honestly make a run in the Big 12 and potentially win a game or two in hoops area. But it all hinges on how those freshmen will perform.
I think there's a chance of it. But I think a quad is very likely for the Longhorns, actually.
I definitely wouldn't be surprised by it. That would not be the craziest thing in the world to me at all.
Actually, I think Texas is the best team in this conference. That's my hot take in this episode. I said I had a hot take coming for you. I think they're the Big 12 champions. I think they have a quad appearance on the horizon. They have experience. They have youth. But I think there's a lot of X factors on this Longhorns roster, and those are X factors I expect to take the leap. DeMonte Claudio, 7'2", 212. Having him and Arthur Lattimore in the same front court is terrifying. You have Vincent Magic, an elite playmaker alongside those elite big men. Even better, you have Phoenix Wyatt as a senior. You have Anthony Young back. He's a great shooter. Then you have Lionel Burgos as a sophomore and is a great shooter in his own right. This team is stacked from top to bottom.
Yeah, they definitely have talent pretty much at every position, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them, be at the top of the Big 12 conference. Like I said earlier, though, I just think Kansas has a little too much depth compared to the other teams in this conference, but definitely wouldn't surprise me to give, Kansas a run for their money. But also,
I think Texas has too much star power that Kansas does not have. Star power wins games in SimWorld U.
How many future draft picks does Kansas have on their roster right now?
How many future draft picks does Texas have on their roster?
You want to tell me that Texas has more guys that'll get drafted than Kansas, JK? Come on now, man. You ain't going to do me like that, brother. You ain't going to do me like that.
I think that they both have at least 5 players that have SWBA potential on their rosters. Both of them. I'm not going to discredit Kansas, but I am going to give the Longhorns credit.
And that is something I never thought I would be doing, would be defending Kansas. But staying in the state of Texas,
yet again,
we are going down to Lubbock and talking about the Red Raiders of Texas Tech. Now, the Red Raiders, they got one of the more underrated pickups, I think, in recruiting in the Big 12, in Tyrell Thompson, a 7-foot forward. We'll probably see time going between the 4 and the 5 spot. But outside of that, what do you like about this Texas Tech team, JK?
I like the addition of Tyrell Thompson. 244 pounds as a true freshman. You find that very rarely. You have a lot of size on this squad in terms of a lot of strength, a lot of weight. Braden Grasso, 6'9", 270. Malik McNeil, 7'1", 211. You are a force to be reckoned with down low for Grant McCaslin's squad. with all of that size, but I'm a little bit worried about their guards. Chris Mitchell is one of their starting guards. He's an elite defender, but he's only 5'11". You got to face a guy like Red Joyner, who's 6'7" at guard. How do you even defend that with an 8-inch gap there?
Yeah, I think that is definitely also the area of concern for me with Texas Tech is their guard play. They have a lot of size, at the forward and at the wing position, and they have what could be arguably one of the best front courts, in the Big 12. But I honestly don't think that's going to be enough to carry them past being a middle-of-the-pack team in the Big 12. I'll just be honest.
I absolutely agree with you right there. Malik McNeil, I think he's one of the best bigs in all of SimWorld U, and I love the addition of Tyrell Thompson to complement him. But the guard play ultimately for TTU is going to be the reason why I don't really think the aspirations are so high in Lubbock, because when your best guard is 5'11", 170, alarms are screaming. And I'm not discrediting Chris Mitchell because he's a phenomenal defender. But he is way too small to be your primary starting guard, especially without a refined offensive game.
Right, and I'd have to agree with you on that one, but there is no denying the amount of talent in SimWorld U, amongst these Texas schools. We're going to see some very, very intense rivalry games, I think, JK.
I'm with you on that one. But I think before we close off this episode, I think we should kind of give the people what they want, give them a little bit of a couple of bold predictions, some things that if they happen, they shouldn't be surprised. What's one thing where if you saw this play out, you'd be like, I'm not surprised at all by this?
I wouldn't be surprised to see TCU be at least a sixth seed, in Hoops area. TCU, very interesting team. Like I said earlier, I like what they bring, what Dixon's bringing in. I think a lot of their success, will depend on what kind of performance they're going to get from Meanie Gibson. But also, Oklahoma State. They're a team who I wouldn't be surprised to see crack the top 4 or the top 3 in the Big 12, which, like we were speaking earlier, JK, it's very possible that, the Big 12 could have 7 or 8 teams crack Hoopsteria. It's very possible.
I agree. That was going to be one of my bold takes, actually. One of my bold takes is that we see Kansas, Baylor, Oklahoma, TCU, Kansas State, and Texas all make it to March. But I will do you one better because you took my idea. I think Kansas State wins 20 games.
Okay.
I think Baylor can win 25. And I think Oklahoma fails to win 20 games, though they do have a better season than last year.
What do you kind of project for Oklahoma, like, win total?
I would say anywhere between 16 and, I'd say 21. They can win 20, but it'll be tough for them.
Yeah, definitely.
Because it's really the Chapa and Miguez show, and I'm not very optimistic about the state of the depth on that roster.
And Floyd
I think
Henderson,
next season is where Oklahoma... I think next season with Carson Cutbirth coming in is where Oklahoma will be in a much better spot in this conference.
Yeah, and you got to throw Floyd Henderson into that mix as well. I think that is going to be one of the best 3-man trios in the conference. But
no depth, though.
Yeah, I was getting but outside of that 3, I'd have to agree with you that there's a lot of unknowns that kind of, keep me from locking them in as a 20-win team. They could definitely get there, but you also got to look at the fact that they struggled last season, and the competition in the Big 12 this season only got tougher. So, one thing I will say before we wrap things up, I think The more I think about it, Oklahoma is either going to struggle and have a record like last season again, or they're going to turn it around and make it to Hoopsteria. I don't think there's really going to be much of a middle ground for them.
Okay.
I think either they make Hoopsteria or they really struggle. The more I think about it, I just don't see a middle ground for them.
Interesting. I think that there's such a wide range of outcomes in this conference where really, unless like Iowa State won the conference, I probably wouldn't be surprised if anything went down.
Yeah, without question. All right, JK, that's going to do it for today's episode of the J-Rock Show. JK, as always, a pleasure having you in the booth, my man. This was fun.
Always. Next episode, we are talking about the Big East. So, buckle in, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to be talking about Villanova. We're going to be talking about the reigning runner-ups of Hoopsteria in UConn. And we're going to be talking about some new Big East teams, such as VCU. So stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen, because the J-Rock Show is one of very few places where you can see the game and be the game.
Peace, y'all.